Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of this fascinating series concerning the search for Muhammad. This is Al Fadi, and with me here in studio is Dr. Jay Smith. And today we're going to take a look at yet another evidence that typically is used to confirm the existence of Muhammad. However, Dr. Jay, as he did last time, will show us how this particular piece of evidence, known today as the Constitution of Medina, can be debunked, actually. In other words, showing that really it doesn't serve the purpose it is intended for in the first place, and that's to prove the existence of the traditional Muhammad. Dr. J, thank you again for the work that you've been doing. What is wrong with this particular document that myself, growing up, I was aware of it, of course, and I've used it always to confirm to myself that the prophet that I'm following is a real person that existed in the time that I'm told that he was there.
Yeah, and this is known as the Constitution Medina. There are other names given to it. It supposedly is a constitution that Muhammad used when he moved after the Hijrah in 622 up from Mecca to Medina. He was a guest to Medina. He didn't grow up there. He came from Mecca, that he'd been there since 570 when he was born. So he was moving into a new place. He was asked to come there by the Ansar, who were the natives who had a problem with the Jews, who were the ones that controlled the commerce. And so there was this rivalry between the native Arabs and the Jews, which tends to happen in an awful lot of places, and they needed someone who is neutral. And so he was chosen as that. He was having a lot of problems with people in Mecca already because of his revelation and his stipulations on these rules and regulations that were coming up from these revelations. And so as he moved then in 622, the first thing he did, according to tradition, now everything I'm telling you is according to tradition. We've already debunked the Hijrah in a previous episode, and we saw that this had nothing to do with Muhammad. It had to do with Heraclius destroying the Sassanians in 622, and we're going to find out about Ilyas ibn Qabisa, who is actually then given the responsibility to arbitrate, which is fascinating. He's doing the arbitrating in the 7th century. Now it's Muhammad who's doing the arbitrating in the 9th century. Do you see? Both of them named Muhammad. Fascinating. Yeah. And this case, this is down in Medina. The Ilyas ibn Qabisa, who's doing the arbitrating, is up in Hira, which is today Kufa. Now, here is, according to the tradition, the 9th century traditions, here is Muhammad. He comes to Medina, and he knows that there's a problem between the Jews and the Ansar. So what does he do? He creates this constitution. Some say it's 50 articles. Some say it's 24 articles. There are many different renditions of it, which shows you in and of itself that there is a problem here because they can't find the original. There is no original, and that's one of the first things right off the top. Where is this original? Just like, where is Waldo? Where is this Quran? Where is Muhammad? Where is any of this material? Where is this Constitution Medina? Lo and behold, the first time we even hear about it is with Ibn Hisham in 833. So there's nothing before the 9th century that even refers to this constitution. That's another big problem, a huge big flag. Let's look at the slide, and let's just bring this up. Now, I've got a picture of, that is nothing more than someone writing up a Constitution Medina and putting up on Wikipedia. That's a facsimile. That is not the Constitution, okay? I've heard people say, so you're showing it and you're asking where it is? No, I could have made that. Anybody could make that. And you notice this one has, let's see, it has 9 plus 8 plus 10. So this is only about 30 of supposedly 56. What's fascinating is when you look at this, this is supposedly a document that's now an arbitration, and there are 3 parties that are included. The Muhajirun are those that come with Muhammad from Mecca. The Ansar are those of the natives who are in Medina, the Arabs in the Medina, and then the Banu Qaynuqa, Banu Nadir, and Banu Qurayza, the 3 major Jewish tribes. Fascinating, those 3 names of the 3 Jewish tribes are not on this constitution. They did not sign it. Even that is a problem in and of itself. We're not going to get into that. We're looking at this historicity.
Those are 3 major tribes.
They are the only three major tribes, all of whom were thrown out of Medina within 5 years.
Bani Qurayza, of course.
And the Qurayza were the ones who were all then executed, 800 of them in 627. But their names are not on it. Because you'll hear lots of Muslims say the reason why they had to be executed and thrown out is because they reneged on this constitution.
That's true. I mean, you always hear that the reason why they Muhammad couldn't trust them anymore because they did renege and they changed their mind about it and turned their back on him.
How can you renege on something you've not signed?
Right.
Because all the signatures are on the Constitution. They're all there of who signed this Constitution. Those names are conspicuously missing. Now, let's get back to this, because that's not what we're arguing about today. What we're arguing, is this historical? Did it exist? And let's look at the problems. Certainly, Muslims love it because it seems like a great model for all of mankind. Until you look at it a little more carefully, and you see it's not a model for any mankind, and it looks like it keeps changing with the centuries, and looks like this is the modern rendition that is now being introduced now in the 21st century. First of all, you'll notice that it's very pro-Jewish. Yet there are no Jewish records of this. And what the reason why there are no Jewish records, as our good friend right here, this guy right here, this is Robert Hoyland, who wrote this book called Seeing Islam as Others Saw It. You mentioned this in one of our previous episodes.
That's right.
This is considered to be the standard work on everything that was written around the time of the 7th century, around the time of when Muhammad would have been living. And he used, because there's nothing from any Islamic sources, there's nothing Islamic in here, because they just don't exist. So what has he done? He's gone to all the surrounding areas around Arabia and has looked at all the documents that you can have. And so he is the one that is very clear. There is nothing Jewish that far south. He makes that claim. They can't find anything. And there are no Jews living in Medina. So who are this Banu Kainuka, Banu Nadir, and Banu Qurayza family that are in the 9th century traditions, redacted back to the 7th century? These are written 200 years later, 201 years later by Ibn Hisham, 240 years with Al-Bukhari. Redacting it back, they got that huge problem right there as a historical anachronism. And so that's why we're doubting that this is not only authoritative, it just doesn't make sense historically. The second thing, well, that's the second thing. The third thing, it contradicts the Sirah and the Hadith treatment of Jews. When you look at the Sirah and the Hadith, they are they're horrendous what they say about Jews, the way the Jews were treated. Look at the Jews in just Tabuk and Khaybar, especially in Khaybar. Look what Muhammad does to the Jews there. Huge, it's enormous. He's cruel. He executes, has coal put on the chest of one Jew because he wouldn't show where his treasury was. I mean, you can see just the enormous amount of cruelty in the Sirah. They hated Jews. It was an enormous amount of Jews. So when Muslims say, but this is what really Muhammad was all about, well, then they're going to have to go and confront their own tradition, because the Sirah and the Hadith are the traditions of what Muhammad said and did from the 9th century. So this confronts those because it shows just the opposite of what the later traditions say they were treated, the Jews, how they were treated. Number 4. The isnads for the Constitution are completely confused because you have confronting isnads with different versions of isnads, which shows that there was an awful lot of confusion, but this makes sense because who created the isnads? Do you know the person that created the isnads?
No.
Shafi, from the Shafi school of Islamic law.
Oh, you're talking about the science of isnad?
The science of isnad was all decided.
Shafi'i?
I'm sorry, I should have said it correctly.
Yeah.
The Shafi is the one that actually introduced
I thought you were talking
it.
about the isnad for this document.
No.
Oh, okay.
The whole science of isnad was created by Shafi in 820. 820. Well, that's just before Ibn
because
Hisham.
the school of Shafi'i school started around that time, basically.
And he is the one that said that an isnad must be traced all the way back to a companion of the Prophet.
Right, and there is something called the ilm al-rijal, or the science of men, to ensure authenticity, their character, everything else.
Schacht, who's reading in the 1950s, the German scholar, that was his area of expertise, was the matin in the isnad, the akhbars. And he says if you take a look, anything that comes before 820, that is attributed before 820, like Ibn Ishaq, which is not, there's nothing there. But he says, interestingly, all the traditions say that all the isnads before they would go in all directions. They would not go back, hardly any of them would go back to Muhammad himself. And that's why Shafi then introduced this notion that you have to have isnads going all the way back to Muhammad. Well, how can you suddenly create isnads in the 9th century of people who said this, who said this, who said this? Unless, of course, this is all fictitious. Can you see that in and of itself? Exactly. To make that stipulation and have a new rule that late in the 9th century, 200 years later, suggests to me this is all concocted. And this is what Schacht said. Therefore, you can't trust any of these.
Well, I mean, brother, I want to remind our Muslim audience who are watching right now, brothers and sisters in Islam, okay, I'm going to tell you this. I love you. You are going to notice, and I hope you're paying attention to all of the data that we've been sharing with you. Everything we grow up knowing, myself, as a former Muslim, of course, everything we know about Islam, you'll always find it a later innovation. That's what I want to call it, a later innovation. Why? Redacted back to the time frame that you and I are told about, when Islam started, when the Quran was revealed, when Muhammad lived, and so on and so forth. That's what you're saying. That's why you have a gap. That's what you have a gap.
This is exactly the same thing. This is the exact thing. Now, here's the problem I have. I'm going to look at some areas that I have. Take a look at the very first article the very first article stipulates that Muhammad is going to be an arbiter between man and God. Would you allow Muhammad to be an arbiter between your God and you?
I don't think so, because Jesus is my arbiter. And second of all, this is foreign, kind of like idea. It's added to Muhammad at a later time, simply because Jesus is our intercessor.
In this case, the Jews were asked to sign this. What Jew would sign a document which starts with its article saying that Muhammad is now the arbiter between their God and them?
And they're still waiting for the Messiah,
in the world
right?
would sign that kind of article. I mean, the ones who created the God, were they not even thinking this through? To stipulate and say, now I've just come from Mecca. I've never lived here before. I've only been here 1 or 2 years. If this was created in 622, between 622 and 624, I'm a guest here, but I'm going to be your arbiter. I'm going to be your intermediary. Everything has to go through me now, and you're God. What kind of idiot would sign a treaty like that? Not me. Not any Jew.
The Jews who rejected Jesus the Messiah.
They're going to suddenly accept Muhammad, who is not even well known. He's not even a native. And remember, what did the Jews do when he came there? They started writing poetic verse against him. Asma bint Marwan, remember
exactly,
her?
and they quizzed him on everything.
And what happened to Asma bint Marwan when she wrote poetic verse?
Gone with the wind.
Well, right through the heart.
Right,
she was stabbed through the heart by Umar, his disciple of Muhammad, while she was suckling her baby there in bed. She had 6 children. In the middle of the night, here comes Umar, who the prophet said, who's going to take care of this woman for me? He stabbed her through her heart, came the next morning, told Muhammad what he had done.
And he said, no 2 goats will...
And what did Muhammad say to him? Blessed are you for what you have done for your prophet.
That's right.
Perfectly accepted. And what was her crime? She wrote poetic verse against him. That's all she did, was write a poem against him.
So what happened to this constitution when she wrote the poems?
Exactly. Now, knowing that's what Muhammad is, the kind of guy he is, and that's the kind of thing he's accepted, who would have signed that treaty? No wonder the Banu Qaynuqa, no wonder the Banu Nadir, and no wonder the Banu Qurayza. I don't even think they existed because there were no Jews in Medina, as we're now finding historically.
I mean, let me play the devil's advocate, Jay, because you're going to hear this question probably from Muslims who claim themselves to be like the authority, let's say Yasser Qadi or others like him. They're going to say, well, wait a minute. You just told me that Bani Qurayza didn't exist in the 7th century. They existed maybe later, but yet you're claiming that Muhammad slaughtered them also in the 7th century. So how can we reconcile this?
Exactly. When did he slaughter them? He slaughtered them in 624. Well, he didn't slaughter them in 624. He threw them out. 625, he threw them out. The ones that came slaughtered were in 627. This Constitution supposedly was written in 622.
So we're
you're talking
debunking
about
the
5 years earlier.
Constitution.
We're debunking the Constitution, and we're also debunking any notion that it's historically valid, because it for not only that it's for the Jews and the unsought. There were no Jews there, so that's the first debunking. But secondly, no Jew would ever sign it to begin with. No wonder they didn't sign it. No wonder. So how could this be a constitution that is a model for all of mankind?
So how would this then apply to the historicity of Muhammad or lack of?
Because when Muslims say this is a proof that he existed, no, it isn't. It's a proof that this is a fraud created by Ibn Hisham, because that's the first time we hear it. That's not till the 9th century, redacted back on. Notice we're saying to redact all the time.
So if you attach him to the document,
this is just another one of that
we've
example.
just debunked the document.
Okay, so my conclusion, let's go back to the slide. The historians like Hoyland right here and Pat Andrews, who has also studied this, consider it a fraud because there was, first of all, no Jews that far south, and the only source for it comes from the 9th century Muslim tradition, Ibn Hisham, way too late and way too far away. Thus, it's nothing more than legend.
All right. Well, we have 2 legends so far that we have debunked. The first one had to do with the astronomy letter, and this one is the Constitution of Medina. What is the next one?
Next one, we're going to do Doctrine Jacobi. Now, before we end this, this also debunks the Pact of Umar.
Oh, please, go ahead.
Because the Pact of Umar is much the same thing. It's the exactly same problem. It is written by Ibn Hisham. That's the first time you hear it, from the 9th century, redacted back. That pact, we don't have any reference before that time. So just like this one is debunked because it's too late and it's saying the wrong things, so would be the Pact of Umar. We don't even have any reference to Umar. We don't even know that he was a caliph. There is nothing on the coins. There's nothing on the inscriptions about this guy. The first time we hear about him is not till Ibn Hisham introduces him in 833. Muhammad died in 632. Umar supposedly was the caliph between 634 and 644. Bingo, you've got a problem there. If he doesn't, no one heard about him, yet he is a caliph and he owns all this land from Tripoli all the way to Afghanistan, and yet there's no coins about him, there's nothing written on any rock inscriptions about him, then that suggests to me he did not exist. Yes, a man named Umar did exist. It's a very popular name, but not a caliph named Umar, and certainly not anybody that would have had a pact, in this case, with the Jews again. Again, there are no Jews there. So how can he have a pact with the Jews in Medina? Just like we saw with the Constitution of Medina, that you throw out, you also throw out the pact of Umar. Now, the next what we're going to be doing is looking at the Doctrina Jacobi, and then we're going to also include that the writings of Sabaeus. So we'll bring those two in the next episode.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, brother. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here. Hopefully, you are enjoying this series and these amazing, of course, documentations and issues that we are raising here. I'm hoping that everyone will benefit from it. If you are a Muslim watching this, all we ask you is to do this simple thing. Go and research the information we're providing to you on your own. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to Jay. Don't listen to anyone. The Lord has given you an amazing ability to reason, to think for yourself, to decide on your own. And at the end of the day, my hope is this, that you will find the truth in Christ Jesus, our Lord. Until then, have a blessed day. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. We can't make these quality videos without the help of partners like you. So please consider becoming a Patreon supporter today at patreon.com/Sira International. I want to make sure you always get notified when we release a new video. So please click the bell to be notified, and of course, make sure to subscribe to this channel. If this video was helpful to you, please click the thumbs up. Thank you.